funky fantasy, dun 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 dun, the ball, bump 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 bump, Stratos arrows, ba da 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 da, War of Nerds, Green Arrow review episode. Welcome back to the War of Nerds podcast, everyone. I'm Nathan Helm.
I'm Alfred Muller.
And I'm Ryan Morgan, also known as Stratos.
And we're your bearded nerdy hosts. And tonight, we bring you an episode about the CW Universe's Green Arrow TV show, also known as The Arrow, which, in my personal biased opinion, was the best DC show for the first few seasons. But I love The Flash too. But let's start around the world and let me ask you guys, what was your favorite season of Arrow?
So full disclosure, I never finished Arrow. I think I got to season 5.
That's okay.
4 or 5. But I'd have to say it was probably season 2 or 3. It's been a while since I've watched it, but that I felt like it really got into the nuts and bolts of what the series was going to be about. And not so much of world building was being done. It was more, all right, now he's Green Arrow. He's going to do what he set out to do. So those are the seasons I really enjoyed.
Honestly, I really think CW in general did a really good job with all of their DC TV shows, but their season ones did an excellent job of hooking you from the very beginning. They made you like the show and carry on throughout the series. Now the series went up and down and would draw you in or lose viewers somewhere along the lines. But I think one thing they did very well was draw you in season 1. And I really liked season 1 of Green Arrow because it hooked me. And then it took it further and got better. But again, it just really brought me in that first initial season.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, you start off, you learn about, he's like, my name is Oliver Queen. I was marooned on an island called Lian Yu for 5 years. And now I've returned to my city with only one goal in mind, to save it. And all this stuff I love the flashbacks. Arrow was phenomenal with flashbacks. The way that it showed the things that happened to Oliver for each season was 1 year on the island. So this, first season, you're learning about Oliver meeting the one gentleman. I believe his name was he was Shadow's father. I don't know why I can't remember his name right now, but do either one of you guys remember what his name was?
Not off the
Shadow's
top of my
father.
head.
All right, that's fine. Well, I'll probably remember later and I'll throw it in there. But Oliver's on this island. He's stranded, and he runs into Yao Fei. That was his name, Yao Fei. And this dude is showing him the ropes, letting him know that there's more going on this island than he realizes. And you've got Colonel Fires over there with all these things going on, and he runs into Slade Wilson, which ends up being the villain for season 2, Deathstroke, my favorite villain out of all of Arrow, hands down. And then
I was going to agree with you there.
Yeah. And Malcolm Merlyn in season 1, finding out that he was the whole visionary of the undertaking. And then you learn that Oliver's mom, Moira Queen, had something to do with it. And then just with Oliver's sister and Oliver keeping secrets from everybody. Diggle's my favorite character, hands down, on the show. I love Dig. He's that solid person to keep Oliver from the edge. And they picking Stephen Amell to play Arrow was a perfect casting choice.
Absolutely.
Felicity Smoke, the OG team Arrow, Dig, Oliver, and Felicity was across just perfect. And then here comes Grant Gustin, this CSI from Central City, this goofy, quirky kid. And he learns about Oliver's secret, which eventually leads to Flash. But man, season 1 was OG Arrow, and it was so good. You think you couldn't beat it, but then here comes season 2 with the Mirakuru drug coming back. You meet Roy Harper, which is another awesome character. And then, Thea comes more into her character. Malcolm Merlyn's a returning feature. Although, depending on which show you saw first, you think you see Malcolm Merlyn, you're like, hey, Captain Jack Harkness from Doctor Who. And then season 3 with Ra's al Ghul in the League of Shadows. But they called it the League of Assassins, actually, in Arrow, and not the League of Shadows. It's been known as both throughout the comics. Um, but man, that's just the first few seasons. But let's go through season 1 since that's the very beginning. Talk about your favorite ups and downs of the season. If you had a favorite character or a favorite episode or just general part of the season, take it away.
I'm gonna have to remember all of this. It's been a while since I've watched these.
Has I'm gonna say, I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of a cop out, but Oliver Queen was my favorite. I mean, I watched Smallville all the way through, and the Oliver Queen in
Nice.
that was interesting. It was a much different Oliver Queen. So when Arrow was coming out, I was like, you mean my favorite superhero from DC gets his own TV show, and they're changing it up and kind of going with like a Dark Knight feel, a darker version of Arrow. I was like, heck yeah, I gotta watch this. And I
Yep.
love every superhero has a secret identity. And in Batman, you see it because he's the biggest name in the DC universe that you see all the time, even to some extent Clark
Yep.
Kent, but really he's the same person on with and without the cape. Batman plays that bachelor, rich boy, blah blah blah, and they did that with Oliver Queen. Although he was not a detective by trade, he had to learn a lot of this stuff, and you get that in the flashbacks. But just in general, like the duality between him. I loved how they did that. How he was a spoiled rich kid who returned, and you expect him to have like this grand epiphany, but he just adopts that persona he had before he was lost. And he's like, whatever, I'm still me. I would finally survive. Yeah, I did some stuff, but I'm no different than when I was abandoned there. But then you see the Arrow version of him and how he's even like despising who he pretends to be. Like he wants to be Arrow all the time, but his real life draws him back. So that kind of character battle was one of my favorite parts.
And I love it too. Oliver Queen, you have failed this city. I love that line. Failed this city. It's great.
When he finds out about his mom, he's so pissed, but he can't
Yeah.
do anything
Oh yeah.
as Oliver Queen, and he has to do it as Arrow. But like just hugging his mom, knowing that she was involved, is destroying him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dude, she was complacent in the murder of the Queen's Gambit going down, Robert Queen's death, even though he took his own life. Still, she had a part to play in that, as well as Malcolm Merlyn. And so all that stuff, she knew more than she was leading on. She didn't know her son was the Arrow, but she eventually figured it out. And man, when she took that sword in the chest from Slade Wilson, that was finally that moment between Oliver and her that really was just like he forgave her. And she's just like, I love you. I always knew. I've known for a while that you were the Arrow. And she's like, I love you. And then he loses her. And it's just like, dang, like, that like Arrow was the darkest of the CW shows. That really that Gotham-esque feel to it. Ryan, go ahead, brother.
I'm never going to be able to pick out a specific episode thinking back on it because it's all like a blur to me. But I definitely want to like touch on what Alfred said there, like the duology of him going back and forth. Like you have the idea of Bruce Wayne and Batman, but I think they did it a little differently with Oliver Queen, where it wasn't just the same billionaire one time and superhero another, and his internal struggles because his family is or was such a part of what made him have those two personalities was what kind of drew us into that. And overall, like
Mm-hmm.
he's a compelling character. Felicity Smoke, just their relationship through it all. Like you said, John Diggle. It's hard to pick out just one when that trio set the tone for the start of that series together. Because just like if you go into Daredevil, not to throw us on a tangent where we go completely away from what we're
Oh no,
talking about again, but with the same idea, they had the supporting characters around what's his Matt, but anyways,
Murdoch,
the
So Matt
Daredevil,
Murdock.
yeah, the Matt
Foggy.
Murdock's character. Those supporting actors and or characters really brought the story more depth than just having that one character preventing people from knowing his identity or working through things, and whether or not or when those supporting characters figure out that there's two characters and not just one too.
I love that because I don't
But
think you get that in the other shows, but I could be wrong. But like, doesn't Dig play Arrow at one point? Like he puts the suit on so that everyone sees Oliver and Arrow in the same place.
There's a point in season 1 when Quentin Lance. So Quentin Lance had basically a mission to take down Oliver Queen because he blamed Oliver for Sarah Lance's suppose she didn't actually die, but that's the way it seemed. So his mission was he wanted to take down Arrow at any and all costs. He hated Arrow and he hated Oliver. So it wasn't going to be a good situation for Oliver either way. So Dig was just like, all right, I'm going to help you out. Dig puts on the suit and he goes and he takes both Oliver and Moira at the same time. And then Quentin Lance is like, okay, you're not the Arrow, obviously, because you were both just taken. And there's a scene before that too. And there's other characters who have done. Roy Harper did that for Oliver, and Roy actually got arrested. And Quentin's just like, I know you're not the Arrow. Like, tell me who it is. And he's just like his little smirk that he wears. He's just like, not telling you anything, dude. I was a criminal for like 2 years. Like, you're not gonna get it out of me, man.
Yeah.
And you talked about Bruce Wayne and the billionaire, persona. That's the thing with Oliver that kind of made him more, almost kind of more of a human side to him than Bruce Wayne was known for. Is he lost that money over time?
Yeah.
Not only did he lose his company, first he lost it to that the one chick in season 2 who was like the sidekick for Slade Wilson. I can't remember what her name was, but she had like a love affair with Robert Queen at one point in time, and he signed the company away. And then season 3, Oliver's CEO, but here comes Ray Palmer, charming, handsome, Clark Kent in another world, and Brandon Routh is awesome. And he eventually loses the company and it becomes Palmer Technologies. And so now he doesn't have billions of dollars. He has to rely on his team. He has to be more forthright and honest. All of these things from his past from the island, which, shocker, spoiler alert, he didn't spend every year on the island. He spent 2 years on the island and then he went to China for season 3. And that's when you learn more about the League of Assassins and the stuff with the bioweapon that they were creating that Ra's al Ghul wanted to release on Star City. But here's an easier question for you guys. Instead of specific episodes, I love the TV show Arrow. Can you tell? I've only watched it all the way through 4 or 5 times. So who's your favorite villain? And let's go with the first 5 seasons, because I feel like once you get to the Ricardo Diaz era, it's just kind of like grasping at straws. So even Emiko Queen, I wasn't a huge fan. So let's go. You first season's Malcolm Merlyn, second season Slade Wilson, Deathstroke, third season's Ra's al Ghul, fourth season is Damien Dark, and fifth season was Prometheus. So whichever one of you guys would like to choose your favorite villain, or a couple if you have a couple, or you can rank them in order of 1 through 5.
I mean, I definitely have always been a Deathstroke fan, even outside of the show, in the comic books, and where he falls in with like Suicide Squad and the different adaptations of Deathstroke and the different things that he's been in. But that's just an awesome character. And
Yeah.
two-sided, like you kind of see the evil side, and like they kind of give him some humanity in parts where you almost feel how he was created to be the bad guy, but like that story or how he fits in his arc and the decisions he makes, which is another thing we do as writers, is like you can have a character do something, but having them decide to do something and go a certain way gives it more weight than this is the only way a character can go. And I think that was kind of what made him so compelling, is the decisions he chooses to make, in my opinion.
One of my favorite, and I know I mentioned this in a previous episode, one of my favorite kind of villains is the polar opposite to the main hero. and for me that was Deathstroke. For you have Arrow, this expert archer, marksman, can do all this stuff, and he's up against an enemy who's just as good, if not better. And it takes what makes Oliver Queen Arrow so amazing, and all of a sudden drops it down a peg, so he still has room to grow. And that's something I despise in certain aspects, where not of Arrow, but in heroes, where it's like they're perfect, they're unbeatable, they don't have a match, and then you take someone, but in this case Arrow does, and I love that because it shows I'm not perfect, I still have room to grow, I can be better than what I am. As good as I am compared to the regular everyday man or woman, I can still grow to match someone else, and that adds conflict for me, because it's psychological conflict. Like, I'm already as good as I think I can get. How do I get even better? I have to use something outside of just my skills. I have to use my brain, or my trickiness or something like that. So I love that way,
Yeah.
the way that they juxtapose those two characters.
So I'm with well, so here's the thing. Deathstroke was my favorite until Prometheus came into play, and then Prometheus became my favorite. But Deathstroke, the thing, Manu Bennett was a perfect choice to play the role. He was last role I saw him in was on Spartacus, and he was great on there too. So here's the thing, right? You were talking about being as good, if not better. So Deathstroke was literally Oliver's teacher on the island, taught him everything he knew about fighting up until that point of the flashbacks. And so after the Mirakuru drug, you kind of almost felt bad for Slade, right? Because the drug warped his mind. And the show did stuff different than the comics did, obviously. Slade was not Oliver's teacher in the comic books.
Mhm.
That's okay. Neither was Raj Al Ghul. Raj Al Ghul was Batman's teacher, but Raj Al Ghul is just a figure, right? You can
Mhm.
kind of flip flop stuff like that. So using Deathstroke in the way that they did, and having him be Oliver's teacher, really brought that emotion out in that second season. Oliver's having to tell his team more about stuff that happened on the island. Oh, I thought he was dead. Shocker, turns out I lied about something else. So let me share that with you guys. And Deathstroke, he had this vendetta against Oliver. And I'm glad they chose not to kill Deathstroke, because they were able to bring him back in season 5, and then later on as a good guy again, have the Mirakuru out of his system, because he's a savage character. And
Yeah.
Ryan, you brought up the Suicide Squad. It brings one of my other favorite characters that was introduced in the first couple of seasons, and that is Floyd Lawton, aka Deadshot. He is
Yeah.
one of the coolest characters ever, and the guy they had him play um, in the CW was, honestly, I would have loved to see him in the Suicide Squad. No offense to Will Smith and his acting abilities, but Will Smith didn't fit the part of
Yeah.
Deadshot. Not his personality, not he's a great actor, but he's just not fit for that type of character for me. Don't get me wrong, Independence Day, booyah, all day long, baby. But Deadshot is a very specific personality. You have to speak in a specific way. You have to hold yourself in a specific mannerism. And the way that that guy played him in the show, and then Amanda Waller eventually gathering the rest of the Suicide Squad, Cupid, and the list goes on. Um, I actually kind of thought at one point they were going to bring Slade Wilson into the Suicide Squad, um, but they didn't end up going that route. So that was all right. But so it was Deathstroke, but then season 5 with Prometheus, like, it just goes to show that Oliver created villains even somewhere else besides on the island. Season 5, you have these flashbacks from Russia and all the stuff that happened there. But meanwhile, you have this villain that was created from somebody Oliver killed on his father's list in like the first season. This Prometheus guy played the DA, and he was the definition of a sociopath.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. He came up with this line. He's just like, Oliver, Oliver, Oliver. I'm 10 steps ahead of you, man. You know what game we're playing yet? And he tilted his head with this like creepy. I'm like, oh, oh, bro. Like, he hit Oliver where it hurt.
Mhm.
He took his son. His son's mother died. Like, all these things that happened in season 5, And going back to the island to fulfill that was really beautiful. Anyway, sorry, Nathan, tangent over. Let's move on to season 2. We were just talking about Deathstroke. What were some of your favorite parts about season 2?
I mean, I think the struggle between having to face the person who taught you everything you know, like just that constant story going throughout the entire season of knowing that my master essentially taught me, so how am I going to one up the person that taught me everything I know? Like through that example, I think that storyline just really sells the fight between the two of them.
Yeah.
Or shocker, he's still alive.
Yeah,
that too. And for me, it was finally like season 1 of Arrow I loved, but I did feel like it was a lot of backstory and building and teaching you who is Oliver Queen. And I feel like season 2, you're with that character, so when the flashbacks happened, it wasn't just, okay, I arrived at the island, I'm trying to survive, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It was, let me get into the nitty gritty of what actually happened while I was on this island. So no longer having a flashback that just gave me backstory, having a flashback that not only gave me backstory, but also pushed me forward in the story itself was a likable part for me.
Wasn't it so cool how they showed present day things happening and being revealed? You don't understand, and that goes in the world building with writing, right? Something's revealed with no explanation, and then boom, Arrow did it perfectly. They go to a flashback and show Deathstroke awakening from the Mirakuru drug and going psychotic and rummaging around Lian Yu, taking all the people from the boat. And then, of course, you got to meet one of my other favorite characters, Anatoly Knyazev from the Russian Bratva. And man, he was a cool character. Loved him so much. But the emotion, just Oliver One realizing that he didn't kill Slade on the island by driving an arrow through his eye. He only created his worst nightmare. And having to see those visions of Shadow coming back, Yao Fei's daughter, and the fact that, well, Fires, well, no, actually, it was Dr. I can't remember what the doctor's name was. Who was the doctor's name from the boat? Ivov, Ikov, Ivov, Ivo. There we go. Ivo was the doctor who was trying to mess around with the Mirakuru drug, something that he had no business messing around with. And well, here comes Sarah Lance. You come to find out she's still alive. That's another thing they did, was this character shows up in Arrow and you're like, who is this? And then you're like, Sarah? Flashback shows Sarah actually didn't die on the Queen's Gambit. And Oliver's faced with the decision of, he's like, Shadow or Sarah, which one? He's like, no, take me. And he shoots Shadow. And then that leads to Slade hating Oliver. And he's just like, you chose Sarah. You chose Sarah. I made a promise to you, kid. And I always keep my promises. Like, okay, dang. That's not good. That's really bad. And then Roy had a good arc in that season, the Mirakuru drug, and him being used as basically the pincushion to create a bunch of Mirakuru soldiers. And then Roy killing the cop and not remembering it, and just really kind of the side effects of him having to live. Similar to the Lazarus Pit with Thea and Sarah, what they had to deal with from the League of Assassins. But man, season 2, that was peak Arrow. That was like, how could it get better from there? That's what you thought, right?
Yeah.
And then
season 3, ladies and gentlemen, more lies from Oliver get revealed. Shocker, Oliver lies a lot and keeps secrets like every other superhero in the CW universe. What? They tell secrets and keep stuff from people? Yeah. That's one trope in superhero shows that I think is done poorly. Everyone keeps secrets. Have a superhero who's different and doesn't keep secrets. Like, I think Barry was a bit better.
Keeps his secrets.
Yeah, that's true too.
Like, don't let them out there.
See,
there's a great idea.
I can't. that's one of my pet peeves in writing, when the main character or someone, even a side character, is just like, I can't tell you. Well, why the heck not? I would love to know, one, as the reader, and I don't see a reason why you don't tell this person. And it's just like, it irritates me so much, and not in a good way where it's like, I know I have to wait till the reveal. It's, no, the reveal could happen right now, and there's no logical reason why you're not doing it other than just keeping the suspense. And that bothers me to no end.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a tangent,
It's a
but
no, it's a poorly overdone trope. Like, you have the Flash and Barry Allen. You're like, okay, here's a guy who doesn't like to keep secrets. It's going to be different with him, right? Well, Joe West is like, you ain't going to tell Iris. You're going to keep that from her. You ain't going to tell her. But, bro, really? We're going down the same path as Oliver? But then you're going to judge said superhero for doing the same thing that you told Barry. Anywho,
Mhm.
so season 3 is a good season. It was good for different reasons than season 2. Raj Al Ghul was a really, really interesting villain, and the guy who played him, people are going to get really salty when I say this, but he was better than Liam Neeson, and that's hard to do. But he played the role generally. He fit the role better, I think. Or maybe it was just because we got more. We didn't get much of Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, so gave him more time, perhaps. But I don't know. I really like the guy in Arrow. He was
Yeah,
just something about him.
I think for Liam Neeson, it was just the actor's name drawing attention to the role, because you
Yeah, I
really
don't
Yeah,
think he
don't.
actually played it well.
Yeah, you don't get much. He's just a person in the beginning and a little bit of training, and then he's just a villain at the end, and he's kind of just thrown in there. So it's not, you
yep,
don't get the character, you don't get the villaininess of a villain. It's just, oh, he trained Batman. Who is this guy again? Oh, that's Ra's al Ghul. I didn't think he was that important in the story. Based on
Mhm.
Batman Begins, you know what I mean? He didn't have
yeah.
any. There's no skin in the game between those two outside of the fact that he taught him, but I didn't get any like hatred for Ra's al Ghul like I should, like I got an Arrow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, he ended up dying at the end of the movie anyways, so it's like,
Mhm.
and I think that was the problem. So, like, a couple things, not to stay on this tangent, but too long. But with Liam Neeson, I think the the name for the actor and then the twist they put in there where you didn't know, like, he's training him, but he's not Ra's al Ghul, and then you find out, spoiler, he is, and he just didn't want him to know in the beginning. Like, I think that builds it to where, like, everybody's like, oh, okay, this is what he's meant to be. But, like, that's not a villain you bring in for one movie and kill at the end. And I think that was very poorly done in that series, where he could have been the one behind everything for all 3 movies,
Mhm.
tying in little bits and pieces. Outside of probably the Joker, I don't see how those two could very well coincide together in the same means,
no.
but I could see them adversaries in trying to kill Batman. But
Yeah.
I just didn't think that was well done. Whereas Green Arrow, they built that character well, and then, I mean, they had a longer period to do it. They had a whole season to build up his arc. But again, he's one you could have drawn out well beyond that too.
And they pointed out a really interesting fact too. They showed that Raj al Ghul is not just an individual; it's a title,
Mm-hmm.
and anybody can be Raz. It just depends on if you're strong enough and you have the ability to do it. They went
Yeah.
into depth about the Lazarus Pit, and as Raz, that's how Raz could live for so long. Raz didn't have super strength. He didn't have super speed. He didn't have any supernatural abilities like a lot of comic book heroes and villains did. What he had was history and knowledge that far succeeded anybody else's, and
Mm-hmm.
a league of merciless
Mirthless,
merciless thank you, I
merciless.
think that's a word. Yeah,
Yeah,
merciless
you're good.
assassins who
We're
were known.
writers.
Good night. Excuse my mouth hole, not speaking what I want my brain to say. There's wires crossed somewhere in there.
Oh, that was
Um,
great, Ryan.
but they tied the characters that Arrow had connections to, like Sarah, Malcolm Merlin. Come to find out, that was where he went, Nanda Parbat. The whole thing leading back to the overtaking from season one. And you're like, so Malcolm Merlin also trained with the League of Assassins? You're coming like Sarah can't get away. Like, how did Malcolm get away? You come to find out, yeah, he didn't do it the right way, and then he broke League of Assassins law by the undertaking.
Mhm.
I said overtaking 5 seconds ago. Ignore that. It's the undertaking. Um, but man, Roz was really just a cool, and you obviously knew the show wasn't over. Like Oliver wasn't actually going to die. But oh, they made it convincing there for a second when Roz
Mhm.
shoved the sword through him and just tossed him off. Um, but it was really cool for him to be able to see the one Japanese gal who was married to was it Masao? Masao? Masao was her husband, and her name was, she wore the mask. She was an expert swords with swords. She had that like cursed sword, and I can't think of her name right now. She was a dope character. I really liked her.
Yeah.
Um, and I believe actually they showed her in the Suicide Squad movies
Mhm.
for a
They
brief
did.
moment. She's
Mhm.
a really cool character. So I was glad she was in the show, but you got a lot more backstory on Amanda Waller and the Suicide Squad and like Amanda Waller's position at Argus and things with like Lila and secrets on the Argus side of things. And season 3 of Arrow was when we finally started getting into crossover territory with Flash. And
Yeah.
I don't think I don't remember if Vandal Savage. I think Vandal Savage came in season 4 of Arrow because that was when John Constantine was introduced for the first time. Damien
Yeah.
Dark, which by the way, Neil McDonough is like an amazing actor. I love that guy. Y'all remember him from the first Captain America? He played one of the Howling Commandos with the big
Yep.
Yeah.
top hat. Oh man. But I think that's pretty much season 3. So that takes us to season 4. What did y'all think of Damien Dark?
Well
I think
played.
Not a great villain, but I think he was well played. Like he did a good job
Yeah.
playing the role.
Mhm.
I think that might have
But
been the season that I stopped watching at. Not just because life got in the way. Like my family moved down to Tennessee and I stayed in New York, so I kind of stopped watching in that time frame because I was doing a lot. So I don't remember the season that much, but I agree enough about Damien Dark being just a well acted part.
that was the season where the whole underground thing was being made with the fake living community, and Damien Dark killed Laurel Lance. So
Okay.
Laurel died in that season, and
Okay.
Thea, they got her to the Lazarus pit.
Okay.
No, they
Okay.
did the Lazarus pit with Thea in season 3. They did the Lazarus
Yeah.
pit with Sarah in season 4
Okay.
because that was when John Constantine came into play from the flashbacks, and he had to
Okay.
take John Diggle and Oliver to the Soul Realm to get Sarah's soul and bring it back. So that happened in season 4.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I saw that arc, but okay. That a lot of that made
Malcolm,
reminded me of stuff though.
he used the talisman for magic. Damien
Mhm.
Dark did, so he had that whole thing where he could like basically suck like the life force out of somebody by
Mhm.
just touching them. So that was the
Mhm.
whole Damien Dark thing.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought it was really the poorest season out of Arrow. Um,
The
so I
problem
just don't
comes
really have
when
much.
the, so what I will talk on then is when you have shows that cross almost not necessarily cross genres because it's all comic book, but there are certain characters that if you don't build it up right should not join together in a TV series or a setting. Again, not
Yeah,
to jump DC Marvel, but like Punisher and Daredevil meshed so well because you had
yep,
brawler fighter in the real world. Arrow would have done better to have like a Batman because they're both human beings who take up a mantle of something. Throwing in Superman would start to bridge that gap. Throwing in Flash would start to bridge that gap. But like Flash has always had Flashpoint. It's always had he can alter timelines and stuff.
Yep.
Arrow, you don't think Constantine, you don't think Soul Realm, you don't think magic and stuff. You think drugs, you think almost Captain America-esque serums. Those kinds of things are in the realm of possibility for Arrow, and you
Metahumans
jump
too.
to metahumans, but not necessarily multiverse, not necessarily different realms of
Correct.
existence. Arrow is
Yep.
very grounded and gritty, and when you do that, it throws it off and almost feels like you're watching a different show.
That was why there was always the jokes and sent back and forth. Oliver goes, he's just like, I'm sorry, Barry, but you live in Central City where it's always sunny and you give your villains cute nicknames. I live in Starling City where it's always dark and people die all the time. And he's just like, that's reality. That's what you think of with Arrow. Now, I understand they needed a way to bring John Constantine in. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't complaining. I love John Constantine, and Matt Ryan did a phenomenal job playing the character. It's a shame there was only ever one season of Constantine. Anyways, they brought him into Legends later, so that was nice. He became a main part of the Legends. But I do agree. Like, what's that?
I'm sorry, Nathan. I was just gonna say Constantine is inspiration, or I draw some inspiration from Constantine for my work.
I could
It's a
definitely
great
see
show. It's a great show. But man, I just, like you nailed it right on top of the head. I mean, Arrow, you just think is more Batman-esque, like regular, just dealing with like gangbangers and warlords and guns and drugs, and occasionally people like the Trickster or people who do have larger than life abilities. But when that happens, he would call Flash. Flash would come over with his team of people who understand multiversal stuff, who understand broken timelines and larger than life gods and stuff like that. That's Flash territory. That's what he deals with. Oliver said time and time again, he's like, oh, Barry, this is too much. He's like, what did you do this time? He's like, I'm sorry, I didn't do anything. Do you time travel again, Barry? Only once, but I didn't, wasn't this time. It's like, oh man. That's why, like, with the Dominators and the aliens having the crossovers is perfect. Crossovers, that's when you get that stuff. The Legends can come talk about protecting anachronisms in the timeline. Team Flash can talk about Flashpoint and all the metahumans. Arrow can talk about Slade Wilson, Damien Dark, like things like that. Like
those twisted psychotic humanity things that create the villains as opposed to the superpowers or the metahumans or things like that. But I definitely agree with you guys there with the introduction to the talisman kind of started to waver some of their fan group there, I think, but they still kept true to a lot of what the show was, which is I think why it went all the way to 8 seasons as opposed to dying right then and there.
And they knew after season 4 that they kind of wavered a wee bit. They had people that were just like, I wasn't a huge fan. Like Damien Dark was part of the League of Assassins. Why didn't you just leave him as this awesome dude who could just fight? That's what Damien Dark is, even in the comic books. And then you lead right into season 5 where they grounded it back down to like normal Arrow with a sociopathic Joker-esque like villain who is extremely intelligent, 10 steps ahead. And you bring it back to the reality of what Arrow, and you leave all the scientific, multiversal, different planetary, metahuman, time-traveling, space wizards crap to the Legends and Flash. and the aliens to Supergirl. Like, you have your different shows, your different heroes who they're versed in what they know. Like, Arrow would be more likely to call Batgirl or Batman, or, yeah, he'd call Flash, but only for a specific problem that would be Flash territory. So when Vandal Savage showed up, they're like, I'm going to call Barry. Team Flash is going to be able to help us with this, okay? That's kind of where I stand. But season 5 was great. Prometheus was a phenomenal villain. How did you guys feel about Prometheus? I just the little soundtrack they did for them, like the
So
I'm
I think season. Go ahead,
I was
Alfred.
just gonna say that this episode is making me want to go back and watch the Arrow TV series again.
Yeah,
so
I'm
good,
gonna
man.
have to go through it again, but I think season 4 and 5, and even like when I got later into Flash as well, like I don't know if it was a point in my life where I didn't have enough time, but that's where like I didn't watch a whole season. I watched like bits and pieces when I could, and I didn't get to finish like
Sure.
every episode of a season. But I do think Prometheus is one of those villains that, again, they made him this sociopathic serial killer, and beforehand you knew him as a completely different normal character before he was the villain. But even though he was the sociopath, he had a reason. Like he wanted revenge. Like he was driven to this madness because of his humanity and his one sole blinding purpose of what he wanted. And that revenge drove him to these extremes. And I think that's like Batman and Green Arrow in the DC Dark Universe really did well, building these characters that weren't necessarily like, oh my god, it came from a planet and it has this powerful ability. It's like, no, this is someone who's just so driven. They found a way to be the most terrifying thing in the city. And like that speaks to itself. And again, like that's where on the DC side, and we spoke to this when we were talking about Batman, is the villains are more compelling sometimes than the superheroes. And like they make you want to
Mhm.
see the villain either win or lose, but at the same time, you're like, I don't want the villain to win. But at the same time, I'm like, man, I could get behind this villain. Even if I don't agree with them, I could get behind this villain.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I mean, even as the DA, Adrian Chase, look, he had things about him that you're just like, huh? Like the way he smiled, he's just like,
Yeah.
I don't like that smile, bro. I don't like the way you're shaking Oliver's hand. I don't know how you know the things that you do. Um, and then when he had Oliver like in prison, and he's just like, say it, Oliver. Say, he's like, I killed him, and I like it. Yeah, that's good. And he's just like, let me go. No, I'm not gonna let you go, Oliver. The game's not over yet. I'm like, bro, that's like Joker material level psychopath. It's
Mhm.
perfect.
I mean, just
Wow.
that one line of I'm not going to kill him, I'm gonna make him wish he was dead. Like just that mentality.
He got Oliver to admit that he enjoyed killing.
Hmm.
Like he broke Oliver. At that point in time, like Oliver was broken. He just was and Adrian let him go after that, but it's because Adrian had won at that point in time. Like he's like, yeah, go ahead. You're worthless. I've won.
Those so again, like I said, I stopped in somewhere in 4, but those moments are especially for superhero stories, and I try and incorporate some of that into my work. I love when you destroy a main character and they come back. They
Hmm.
build themselves up again. I did not like how they did it in The Dark Knight Rises, but I love the emotional and mental breaking of a main character just to watch them grow back because they normally grow
Yeah.
back stronger, and the thing you did to break them doesn't work again, and they're able
Hmm.
to defeat the enemy normally in that case. Love those arcs. It's just so powerful and resonates with me.
When you have those arcs too, it really drives it home when you have another villain down the line that can nearly break them again.
Hmm.
Like to where it almost breaks them completely. Like it doesn't work in the same way it did last time, but oh, it's close. And you're like, wow, okay, there's something about this villain that's like he's not hurting Oliver in the same way. Like Ricardo Diaz was a prime example. He was actually a pretty decent villain. He was season 6 and season 7 of Arrow. They used the same villain for 2 seasons, which I actually quite enjoyed because it allowed you more time to learn about how this villain was really pulling the strings. He was a leader of like a crime syndicate, basically. It was the Dragon. And they had these other really cool characters that came in that worked for Diaz that were just basically these elite assassins with different abilities. And I wasn't a huge fan of later seasons of Arrow. Arrow ended at season 8 after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Uh, and I won't go into too much spoiler detail, but for the listeners, if you haven't watched Arrow, I recommend it. It's a really good show.
I do. Yep.
It stays pretty true to the core roots of what Arrow is throughout the series. Just towards the end, it kind of loses a bit of what it's got going on the villains side of things because they kind of run just a bit dry. Flash suffered in the same way. They kind of tried to drag it out with the Red Death and Godspeed towards the end with August Hearth. It's like, I get it. You want to get to like, having this cool, but really Flash should have ended at like season 7. You already went through Savitar, Reverse Flash, all this stuff. It's the same thing with Arrow. Your first 5 seasons, I would say Arrow could have ended after season 6, but Crisis on Infinite Earths, there's a reason why it lasted because of Oliver had a role to play multiversal wise.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you guys got any final remarks?
I definitely think, as much as the crossovers sometimes were hit or miss with the CW shows, I think it brought the fans of the different shows, because you had your fans that were diehard Supergirl, your diehard Flash, your diehard Arrow, and it would bring them into the other show, sometimes just for that crossover, and sometimes that crossover would sell them to start watching that other show. And I think they
Yep.
really found something there with how they brought their characters together in that way. And I really think they dropped the ball when they didn't transition some of those characters to the movies and change the actors. But that was like my take on where they had nailed these shows. Why would you go to big box office names when you had such a fan base backing these individual characters?
Oh
So,
yeah,
Well,
100%.
100%. First, Arrow did it first. They brought Barry Allen in.
mhm.
You stole my line, sir. I see that.
Yes, I did.
I like it.
Yes, I did.
I love it. I love it. They brought Barry Allen in, just regular CSI, into Arrow, and then you find out Barry was struck by lightning, and you're just like, you already know if you've read anything about the comics, Barry Allen is the Flash.
Mhm.
Okay? Yeah, Bart Allen's been it, his kids, him and Iris's kids too, but whatever. Barry Allen's the Flash in about just every universe that you can think of. So that's like, they're probably going to do a Flash show. Oh,
Yep.
season 3 of Arrow starts. Season 1 of the Flash starts. So you're like, boom. Now you're invested in Barry. You've seen him twice in Arrow. You're like, I'm gonna go watch the Flash.
Mhm.
Flash does it with Supergirl. Flash first season, he ends up on Supergirl's world, and you're like, Kara, Zor-El, Supergirl. Like what? First of all, Barry just literally like broke the dimensional plane for the first time and ended up on a different planet. But now you're like, does this mean Supergirl's happening? It does indeed. So
Mhm.
then you've got people who are just like, boom, Supergirl fans, even Superman fans, because Superman is involved in Supergirl. Boom, you got them for that show. And then the characters that they built throughout Flash and Arrow are the Legends of Tomorrow. And so
Yep.
once Legends starts, you've got that. And anybody who knows anything about Batman would be interested in Batgirl. I don't like that they changed actresses. I thought the one gal who did the first version was perfect, but they did what they needed to, and the next gal did a pretty decent job. So I wasn't too mad about it. And then Black Lightning and all the other stuff that follows. And I didn't really follow all the extra shows. I just kind of stuck with the core 4. But that's what they do. If you know anything about it, like Ryan said, you tease your fans by bringing that character into a said show, letting people know they're going to have their own show. So
Mhm.
stand by, prepare yourselves. And as soon as I saw Barry and Arrow, I'm just like, Alfred, your favorite is Arrow, but me's always been the Flash. And I'm just like, I've always loved Arrow too, but I'm like, all right, you know what? Don't hate me, Arrow. I'm going over to the Flash. So
See, that's something, and this is kind of be my final thoughts. With with the DC shows, you take any of them. You have Supergirl, they don't have Superman. You have Batgirl, you don't put Batman in it. You have Gotham, it's about Commissioner Gordon while he's coming up through his stuff. You have Arrow, the same way Marvel took the non-Spider-Mans of the universe, the non-Fantastic Fours, and built their Marvel Cinematic Universe. The shows of DC did that. They took the heroes that may not get the spotlight all the time and gave them the spotlight, and that seems to be a trend that maybe DC should stick to if they want to try and recreate another superhero renaissance movie renaissance and stick to the characters that don't have as much spotlight on them, because I think those are the ones that are new, they're fresh. How many Batman reboots are we gonna watch? I mean, it's the same thing over and over and over, and enough is enough.
Yeah, but they're gonna keep
Hash-
doing it.
Oh yeah,
So-
without a doubt they're going to. They're never gonna stop.
Hashtag Team Barry Allen, aka Grant Gustin. Hashtag remove Ezra Miller. I've said what I've said. I said it.
Yeah.
Get rid of that psycho. Remove him from the role. No. Just
Yeah.
no. For multitudes of reasons, but yeah.
And I will just to touch on what DC did with those and the crossovers. Marvel attempted to do the same thing through Netflix when they had Luke Cage, they had Iron Fist, they had Jessica Jones, and they tried to pull all of those together.
They failed.
And they failed. I mean, they weren't individually. I liked those shows, but they were not able to replicate what DC did. And DC tried to replicate what the Marvel movies did, and they failed. So each one has had its own successes, and you could argue which ones are the greater successes, but ultimately they found their niche of fans that enjoys what they do, and when the other one tries to replicate the other, it doesn't ever pan out.
Nope.
No. And I think even though you found your niche, also don't try to extend it past its due date. All right, when milk spoils, you throw it out. You don't just be like, I'll be like Naruto and drink spoiled milk and hope for the best, on the first day of the tuning exams. No, it doesn't work that way, okay? So Arrow and Flash, I love them. They're dear to me, but they were past their expiration date. They were running with material that, if you want to do Godspeed, which is one of the coolest speedsters in the comics, or you want to do the Red Death, basically a speedster version of a Dark Batman or Batwoman from a different universe, then that's fine. Do that earlier. Use the arcs that you have instead of these multi-villain seasons. Make one villain, one season, be done. First season, the Reverse Flash. Second, Zoom. Third, Savitar. Fourth, the Thinker, which, by the way, the Thinker is an amazing villain. But we'll talk about the Flash on another day. Point being, they had their niche. Marvel failed while trying to. Daredevil was amazing. All 3 seasons was savage.
Yeah.
The guy who played Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, great job.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
That's Private Pile.
He's an amazing.
That's Private Pile.
Yes. Yep.
From Full Metal. Yeah, that's Private Pile.
Yep.
You hear me, Private Pile? Nah, he did a great job. We'll talk about each of the Marvel TV shows too. We'll get to episodes on those. We've got lots to say about Luke Cage. At least Ryan and I do. So,
I've got good and bad to say.
but ladies and yeah. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, what's that, Alfred?
No.
Oh, well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Arrow review, and perhaps we've convinced you to check the show out if you haven't seen it. And don't let our opinions or our talks or anything that we say deter you from watching something. Actually, I kind of hope it makes you go watch it just so you can create and form your own opinions, because that's the beauty of everything, is the freedom to make your own opinions about these things. And while I did not like the reboot of the Fantastic Four, it is an atrocity and a sin and an abomination. There are some people who are just like, it was great. You're
Glad you liked it.
welcome to your opinion, but I feel bad for you because, anyways, talk about that another day. So, if you need to find any of us on our socials, they're at the bottom of the screen, and come spend some time with us. Email us with any questions that you have. The Discord's up and running. We'll add some cool stuff in there for the community, for the stuff and Patreon and whatnot. But until then, I've been Nathan Helm.
Alfred Muller.
What's
please
that, Alfred?
I was going to say, please fill up the comment section. We'll chat with you all, discuss, and
or
have
shoot
good
us an
time.
email.
Mhm.
Yep. And I've been Ryan Morgan or Shadow Saros.
And until next time, funky fantasy, the bold, Stratosaurus, it's the War of Nerds. Peace.